want to bring in now our Nancy Cordes, CBS News congressional correspondent, who was in this briefing. And again, Nancy, your thought as we heard from, again, the 7 GOP members of this committee, and really the question that you asked very simply, if any of them believed that Hillary Clinton had lied.
The short answer is that some of them were willing to say that, Josh, publicly, that they do believe that she lied, or at least that she misled the American people about the genesis of this attack in the days following the attack. And others, like Chairman Gowdy himself, aren't comfortable making that conclusion either in the report itself or at this press conference. Doesn't mean that he may not believe it. He certainly signaled that people should read the report and draw the right conclusion, which implies that he believes that that should be the conclusion. But he knows that making a comment like that would certainly politicize this report even more than it already has been. And
again, Secretary Clinton herself has said that, repeatedly referred to her own, the hours of testimony that she had given, and that she has made it known that she feels at peace with that testimony. And when you specifically asked what new information was gleaned from this report, again, some 2 years and some $7 million in the making, Representative Gowdy did point to things he believed were new. What impact might that have, however, on the narrative as known?
I think it has the most impact on the narrative, frankly, when it comes to the military response to this crisis. He said again and again in this press conference, and made it very clear in the report itself, how little the military did to mobilize resources to try to respond to Benghazi. Now, the military has always argued that there were no resources in the near vicinity and that they couldn't have gotten there in time anyway. But the question that this report asks in a much more pointed way, I should say, than other congressional reports have is, but why not even try to get here, especially when this was an open-ended attack. The military didn't know what was happening. They didn't know when it would end. There was always the possibility that that U.S. civilians might need help. Why wasn't more done? Why, here in Washington, was there confusion about what kinds of resources the U.S. even had in Benghazi? Why was there confusion about the rescue team that had come from Tripoli on its own to try to get into the compound and save some of the people who were under siege? So I think the one lasting impact of this report is that it lays out much more baldly than, let's say, reports that were done by the House Armed Services and Senate Armed Services committees, just how much confusion there was in military ranks about what was possible, what was happening, and what should be done.
And yet, we did hear Representative Mike Pompeo of Kansas repeatedly say that he did not believe in any way that there is a fog of war explanation to be given here. He also called then Secretary of State Clinton's leadership morally reprehensible with regard to her actions, and called it a failure at the most senior levels of government. I also want to ask you something about that Representative Susan Brooks of Indiana stated, that one of the things that she felt was new in this report as well was not just how much security was inadequate on the ground there in Benghazi, but that suggesting that this facility had been kept off the radar, if you will, that the facility and none, in fact, had met basic security requirements there. We also heard some questions for Chairman Gowdy with regard to covert weapons operations there. It certainly speaks to, but did not take too many steps towards the suggestion that there was an entirely different thing going on here.
So I think everything that you point out, Josh, falls under a category that I would describe as this committee believing that the State Department, the Defense Department, the administration writ large kind of took its eye off the ball in Libya. That after after making this push to go in to depose Gaddafi and to establish a U.S. presence there, that administration officials, including the Secretary of State, including DOD officials, essentially moved on to other things and weren't aware, A, that security was deteriorating in Benghazi, that they had ignored requests for more security, that they really weren't focused on what was going on there. But the mitigating factor here, Josh, is that you heard here in this press conference one of the authors of that report say that even the ambassador himself was surprised the day before the attacks when he arrived in Benghazi and discovered how much the security situation had deteriorated there over the past month. And so it's a legitimate question to ask. How aware should Washington have been that things were getting really bad in Benghazi when the U.S.'s own ambassador in Libya was taken by surprise when he got there?
And certainly echo the comments of Representative Brooks when she spoke to the recommendations that make up the last section of this 800-page report, recommendations that she dug into briefly in speaking about the lack of any plan for any possible attack on the part of the CIA and the DOD and state, asking, however, rhetorically, why hadn't these things been considered?
I think because you had a lack of communication. You had this CIA safe house there in Benghazi that was, sort of flying under the radar. The State Department was aware of it, but didn't want to speak too openly about it because, that would have sort of blown the CIA's cover. And so that's why at the very beginning of this, even DOD officials weren't quite aware of this annex and of the resources that were embedded there. And that only led to the confusion. They talked in the report about how there was one military team that was being positioned to get ready to go in that was told to change in and out of civilian clothes several times as they tried to figure out whether to go in or not. The report also details the fact that General Ham here in Washington gave orders that don't appear to have been carried out or appear to have morphed as they made their way down the chain. So there's a lot of confusion, and what the Republicans on that behind that podium were arguing is that you can't attribute it, as you pointed out, to the fog of war. You can't attribute it to the fact that just things were going on and nobody knew what was happening, because they argue that from the very earliest days, top State Department officials in Libya knew that this was a planned attack, that it didn't have much to do with the video. And so what they're arguing in this report, and there is some basis for this, is that after the attack, the State Department, the White House, Susan Rice on those Sunday talk shows sort of spun one narrative about what had happened when there were very clear indications that something else had happened. And why did they do that? Well, Gowdy and the others argued that it's because there was a presidential election coming up and that President Obama and Hillary Clinton had both staked some of their credibility on the notion that this invasion of Libya, with no boots on the ground, just using air power, had been a success. And this Benghazi attack, they argue, contradicted that.
As several representatives actually pointed out, there had been a planned visit by then Secretary of State Clinton due to happen the next month. That October, again, arguing that political concerns did win out. However, need be stated again, Chairman Gowdy, as did the others, repeatedly said essentially what the chairman himself said, that he ultimately won't judge the culpability of any one person. Again, Nancy Cordes there on Capitol Hill for us. We will certainly be parsing the report and this response to it throughout the day. We really appreciate the time, Nance.
You're welcome, Josh.